The air in RCA Studio B was thick, not just with the humid Nashville summer, but with anticipation. It was late past midnight, the kind of hour where creative genius either bloomed or wilted. Elvis Presley stood at the microphone, bathed in the soft glow of the recording lights. His guitar, a sleek Gibson J200, hung low, but he wasn't playing it, not right now. His voice was the instrument they were all focused on. Around him, the band Scotty Moore on lead guitar, Bill Black on bass, DJ Fontana on drums were ready. Their instruments poised, their eyes fixed on him. In the control room behind the thick soundproof glass producer, Chet Atkins sat hunched over the mixing board, his brow furrowed in concentration. Next to him, engineer Bill Porter adjusted knobs, his movements precise, almost surgical. The song was "Can't Help Falling in Love." They'd been at it for hours, maybe even days, refining, perfecting, chasing that elusive spark that made a song truly timeless. Each take was good, some were great, but none had quite captured the magic they all knew was there. Waiting, Elvis was a perfectionist perhaps, more than anyone knew. He didn't just sing the notes, he poured his soul into every syllable, every vibrato. He wasn't just chasing a hit, he was chasing a feeling. All right, one more time. Chet's voice crackled through the intercom. His tone was tired but laced with a hopeful edge. Let's try to get that tenderness, Elvis. Really feel it. Elvis nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Took a deep breath, his chest rising, then slowly exhaled. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the melody fill his mind. The lyrics paint pictures. He imagined the quiet intimacy of the song, the gentle promise, the unwavering devotion. He didn't just sing about love, he became it. The studio was silent save for the hum of the equipment. DJ tapped his sticks lightly, a soft, almost imperceptible rhythm. Scotty adjusted his strap. A small creak of leather. Bill shifted his weight, his fingers resting on the fretboard of his upright bass. They were a unit, a well-oiled machine, powered by Elvis's incredible energy. Elvis opened his eyes, a new resolve shining in them. He gave a small nod to DJ, who then clicked his sticks together, a sharp, clean sound that cut through the silence. The gentle arpeggio of Scotty's guitar began a delicate cascade of notes, followed by the soft thrum of Bill's bass. Then DJ's brushes on the snare, a whispery rhythm. The introduction was perfect, setting the mood like a soft twilight. And then Elvis's voice. Wise men say only fools. Wise wine tempts gray. He leaned into the microphone, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm, his eyes half closed, lost in the music. In the control room, Chet leaned forward, his eyes glued to the VU meters, which danced in perfect sync with Elvis's voice. Bill Porter adjusted a dial, a tiny, almost imperceptible tweak. But it made all the difference, bringing out the warmth, the clarity. They knew it, they could feel it, this was the one. Scotty's guitar solo was restrained, tasteful, a beautiful counterpoint to Elvis's vocal. Bill's bass line was a steady, comforting heartbeat, and DJ's drumming was subtle, enhancing, never overpowering. They weren't just playing, they were breathing together. An organism of sound. Elvis returned, his voice even more heartfelt, more vulnerable. Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. The emotion was palpable. It filled the studio, seeped into the very walls. It was the kind of performance that silenced the world outside, pulling everyone into its tender embrace. Chet had a small smile on his face, a rare sight at this late hour. Bill Porter nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes still fixed on the board, but his shoulders relaxed. This was it, the take they had been dreaming of, the perfect one. The second verse flowed. Then the chorus began, each repetition gaining a deeper layer of meaning, a richer texture. Elvis's voice soared, then dipped, always controlled, always full of heart. He hit every note with impeccable accuracy, yet it never felt mechanical. It was alive, a living, breathing thing. Scotty, usually stoic, found himself smiling as he played. He exchanged a quick, knowing glance with Bill. And DJ, they felt it too, the undeniable electricity that crackled in the air. This wasn't just a good take. It was a moment. It was one of those rare times when everything clicked. When the individual talents merged into something greater than the sum of its parts. Elvis, lost in the song, closed his eyes again, letting the emotion guide him. He imagined a quiet room, a flickering candle, two hearts beating as one. He wasn't just singing to an audience, he was singing to one person, pouring out his deepest feelings. This vulnerability, this raw honesty, was what made his performances so powerful. In the control room, Chet Atkins leaned back in his chair, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture of relief. The hours, the countless takes, the frustrating false starts, it was all worth it for this. This was the sound he'd been chasing. This was gold. Glanced at Bill Porter, who was meticulously monitoring the levels, his concentration absolute. "Keep it steady, Bill," Chet whispered, though his voice was thick with emotion. "This is it. This is the one." Bill Porter gave a tiny nod, his gaze never leaving the meters. He was in his element, the silent guardian of the sound. His fingers danced lightly over the faders, making tiny adjustments, ensuring every nuance of Elvis's voice, every gentle strum of Scotty's guitar, every soft tap of DJ's brushes, was captured perfectly onto the magnetic tape. The tape reel spun smoothly, faithfully, documenting this moment of pure artistry. The song built towards its quiet climax. Elvis held the sustained note full of a gentle power before easing into the final lines. "For I can't help falling in love with you." His voice faded slightly on the last word, a soft, lingering whisper that hung in the air, a breath of pure devotion. The last chord from Scotty's guitar gently dissolved into silence. DJ's brushes ceased their gentle sweep. Bill's bass note hummed, then faded. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence in the studio was profound, almost reverent. It wasn't an empty silence, but one filled with the echoes of beauty, a lingering warmth. Even the hum of the equipment seemed to quiet down as if respecting the moment. Elvis opened his eyes. He looked at Scotty, then Bill, then DJ. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile of quiet triumph and deep satisfaction. He knew it. They knew it in the control room. Chet let out a long, slow breath. Oh, yes. He reached for the intercom button, a feeling of immense relief washing over him. He was about to praise them, to congratulate them, to confirm that this was indeed the master, take the one that would go down in history. Bill Porter, already reaching for the stop button on the tape machine, allowing the tape to spool out a few more seconds of ambient room tone. To capture the decay, glanced at Chet. A rare, wide grin was spreading across his face. It was a grin that spoke of success, of a job well done, of capturing something truly special. The tension which had been building for hours, even days, suddenly evaporated, replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. Everyone in that studio, from the king himself to the quietest technician, felt it. They had done it. They had created magic. And then, just as Chet was about to press the button, just as Bill Porter's finger hovered over the stop control, a sudden blinding flash erupted from the wall socket near the amplifier stack. A loud, violent crack split the air, followed immediately by a guttural, dying moan from the equipment. The lights in the studio flickered wildly, then dimmed, plunging the room into a murky twilight. An acrid smell of ozone and burning electronics filled the air, acrid and sickening. The tape machine in the control room let out a terrible grinding sound, a sound of agony and destruction, and then shuddered to a halt, the reels frozen in place. Control room itself plunged into near darkness, only the faintest emergency lights flickering on. Chaos erupted. The immediate aftermath was a cacophony of sound, or rather the sudden, terrible lack of sound from the equipment replaced by human reactions. Scotty yelped, dropping his guitar slightly. DJ let out a surprised grunt, his drumsticks clattering to the floor. Elvis, who had just been basking in the glow of the perfect take, flinched. His eyes, which had been closed in blissful contentment, snapped open wide with shock. The serene smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. The sudden dimming of the lights, the smell of burning, the chilling silence from the once humming amplifiers. It was all too much, too fast. In the control room, the scene was even more dramatic. Chet Atkins sprang from his chair, as if electrocuted himself. "What in the blazes?" he bellowed, his voice laced with panic. He fumbled for a light switch that now did nothing. Bill Porter, the usually unflappable engineer, was staring in horror at the tape machine. The reels were motionless, a section of the precious magnetic tape hanging limp, discolored, perhaps even melted. A small wisp of smoke curled up from behind the console. "No, no, no, no," he muttered, his voice strained, almost a sob. His hands were trembling as he cautiously reached towards the power outlets, then pulled back sharply, fear in his eyes. Power surge! Blown fuses! Blown everything! The air conditioner, which had been a steady background drone, sputtered and died. The studio grew instantly hotter, the humid summer night pressing in. The emergency lights in the studio cast long, distorted shadows, making the familiar instruments look like monstrous broken things. "What happened?" Gotti called out, his voice laced with confusion and alarm. "It's the power," Chet yelled back, his voice raw with frustration. "Some kind of surge. Blew the main fuses, I think. Maybe more." The implications were immediate and devastating. That perfect take, the one they had just poured their hearts and souls into, the one that was supposed to be the master, the one for the album, it was gone, or at least potentially ruined. Tape machine had stopped, not at the end of the song, but mid-record. What state was the tape in? Was it erased? Damaged? Was the recording lost forever? A wave of despair washed over the room. The initial shock gave way to a heavy, crushing realization. All that work, all that effort, all that perfection potentially wiped out. In a single violent crack, Scotty ran a hand through his hair. His voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. Bill Black just shook his head, his shoulders slumped. DJ picked up his fallen drumsticks, but his movements were slow, lifeless. The vibrant energy that had filled the studio just moments before was replaced by a heavy, suffocating gloom. Elvis stood perfectly still, his eyes scanning the dim room, taking in the scene. He saw the despair on his bandmates' faces, the frantic panic of Chet, the utter defeat in Bill Porter's posture, as he gently, almost reverently, touched the ruined tape reel. He felt it too. A sharp, cold stab of disappointment, a gut-wrenching sense of loss. He had given everything to that take, every ounce of his emotion, his skill, his artistry. To have it snatched away, just as it reached its peak, felt like a cruel joke. He walked slowly towards the edge of the recording area, towards the window of the control room. He pressed his face against the glass, trying to see the extent of the damage on the equipment. He could see the smoke, faint but undeniable, curling up from the back of the mixing console. He saw the tangled wires, the dead meters, the motionless tape machine. Chet Atkins was pacing now, muttering to himself, running his hands through his hair. Unbelievable. After all this time, all this work. What rotten luck. We were there. We had it. His voice rose, tinged with a mix of anger and sorrow. This is just catastrophic. Bill Porter had knelt down, his fingers gently touching the damaged section of tape. He looked up, his eyes meeting Elvis's through the glass. His expression was one of profound sadness, a silent apology for something beyond his control. Elvis pulled back from the glass, his jaw tight. He looked at Scotty, then Bill, then DJ. He saw their faces mirrored his own initial devastation, but then a thought began to form in his mind. This wasn't just about him, it was about them too. They had poured their hearts into it. They were a team, and a team didn't just give up when things got tough. He took another deep breath, a conscious effort to steady himself. The anger, the frustration, the bitter disappointment, he felt it all. But he couldn't let it consume him. Not now, not when everyone else was crumbling. He was the leader. He had to be strong. He had to find a way to fix this, or at least to pick up the pieces. Even if the perfect take was truly gone forever, the session wasn't over. Not yet. The silence in the studio, broken only by Chet's frantic muttering and the occasional cough from the lingering smoke, was heavy. It pressed down on everyone, a physical weight of despair. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a bitter, aching emptiness. Scotty Moore leaned against his amplifier, his guitar still slung across his shoulder like a dead weight. His eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing in particular. He thought about the hours they had put in, the late nights, the endless rehearsals, the search for that perfect sound, that perfect feel, and then, just like that, gone. A cruel twist of fate. It was enough to make a grown man want to pack up his gear and just walk away from the music business forever. The raw frustration was a burning knot in his stomach. Bill Black sat heavily on a stool, his head in his hands. He didn't even bother to take his bass off. He just sat there, defeated. He'd played on countless sessions, seen his share of technical glitches, but never anything like this. Never after a take so utterly, undeniably perfect. It felt like a punch to the gut. All that effort, all that energy just to watch it disappear in a flash of light and a puff of smoke. DJ Fontana, usually so full of dry wit and a steady rhythm, was sitting motionless behind his drum kit, his sticks still on the floor, where they'd fallen. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes cast down. He felt a deep weariness settling in. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was an emotional fatigue that drained him of all desire to play, to create, to do anything at all. The joy had been sucked right out of the room. In the control room, Chet Atkins had stopped pacing and was now leaning over Bill Porter, his voice a low, urgent murmur. "Is it salvageable, Bill? Please tell me it is. Any part of it?" Bill Porter slowly shook his head, his face grim in the dim light. He carefully lifted a section of the tape. It was indeed damaged, melted in places, twisted. The tape itself, it's compromised. And the machine, the heads are probably shot. It stopped so suddenly, it must have stretched or even mangled the tape at the critical point. He pointed to a small, almost invisible imperfection on the tape, right where the final notes would have been captured. Even if we could get the machine running, playing this back, it would probably just shred more tape. And the quality, it's gone, Chet. It's just gone. His words, though quietly spoken, echoed through the intercom system that was still, miraculously, somewhat functional. The band members heard it. The final crushing confirmation, the perfect take, was irrevocably lost. Collective sigh of profound disappointment rippled through the studio. Scotty slowly shook his head. Bill let out a low groan. DJ closed his eyes as if wishing he could rewind time just 5 minutes to capture that one glorious moment before it vanished. The atmosphere turned sour, thick with frustration and a sense of futility. What was the point to try again? Chase that ghost of perfection that had just slipped through their fingers. It felt impossible. The magic felt gone. The inspiration had been violently snatched away. Even Elvis felt the cold grip of despair. He had pushed himself harder than ever for that take, dug deeper into his emotions. He had felt the pure artistry flow through him, a connection that was rare and precious. And now it was as if someone had ripped a piece of his soul right out. He wanted to lash out, to yell, to smash something. He wanted to walk out, go home, forget this night ever happened. The frustration was a hot, bitter taste in his mouth. He looked around at his band, his friends, his musical family. He saw their defeat, their exhaustion, their quiet heartbreak. They had followed him, believed in him, pushed themselves with him. And now they looked utterly broken. He could just give up, tell Chet to pack it in for the night, come back tomorrow maybe, and try to recapture it. But he knew deep down that tomorrow would feel different. The raw emotion, the spontaneous perfection of this moment would be impossible to reproduce exactly. That particular magic was tied to that performance, that feeling, that specific night. He could feel the weight of everyone's disappointment pressing down on him. They looked to him even subconsciously. He was the king, the front man, the one who usually pulled them through, but right now he felt as broken as they looked. The smell of ozone still hung in the air, a constant reminder of the disaster. The dim emergency lights cast long, unsettling shadows. The quiet hum of the faulty power lines outside seemed to mock them. It was a picture of utter dejection, a session on the brink of collapse. They were tired, frustrated, and completely disheartened. The night, which had promised glory, had delivered only bitter defeat. This was the moment, the lowest point, the decision point. Would they give in to the despair, or would something or someone pull them back from the brink? Elvis stood still for another long moment, letting the wave of despair wash over him, acknowledge it, and then slowly he pushed it back, closed his eyes briefly. Not in defeat, but in contemplation. He remembered all the times he'd faced setbacks, small and large, throughout his life. He remembered his mama telling him, "Son, when things get tough, you don't give up. You find a way to get back up." He opened his eyes, and a different kind of light shone in them. Not the light of perfection, but the quiet glow of resolve. He looked at Scotty. Then Bill, then DJ really looked at them, seeing past their defeated postures to the core of their talent, their dedication. He then looked towards the control room, seeing Chet's frustration. B knew what they were all thinking. "It's over. We lost it. Let's just go home." But Elvis wasn't just a singer. He was a leader. And in this moment, when everyone else was crumbling, he found a surprising wellspring of calm within himself. It wasn't a calm born of indifference, but of a deep understanding, empathy for the collective disappointment, and a fierce, quiet determination not to let it win. He took a slow step forward, then another, walking towards Scotty. The floorboards creaked under his boots, a small sound in the overwhelming silence. He put a hand gently on Scotty's shoulder. Scotty looked up, his eyes bloodshot, surprised by the touch. Elvis didn't say anything right away. He just looked at him. A silent communication passing between them, a shared understanding of the loss, but also something else. A flicker of hope. Then Elvis's voice, quiet but clear, cut through the oppressive gloom. He acknowledged the loss, didn't try to diminish it. This was important. He wasn't pretending it hadn't happened. He moved to Bill, who still had his head in his hands. Elvis gently clapped him on the back. A light but firm touch. "You played your heart out, Bill." Every note was pure gold. Bill slowly raised his head, his eyes meeting Elvis's. There was a glimmer of surprise in them. Then Elvis walked over to DJ, picking up one of his fallen drumsticks and handing it to him. "And you, DJ? You made those brushes sing." DJ took the stick, his fingers closing around it, a small, almost involuntary grip. He looked at Elvis, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Elvis stood in the center of the room, facing all of them, his presence radiating a quiet authority that somehow transcended the chaos. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't preach. He just spoke simply and honestly. "Look, I know what we all just lost. I felt it too. It was one of those moments you dream of, right? Everything aligned." He paused, letting that sink in. He even managed a small, wry smile, a hint of his usual charm breaking through the tension. In the control room, Chet and Bill Porter were watching, utterly mesmerized. Chet had stopped his pacing. Bill Porter had straightened up from the ruined tape machine. They hadn't expected this. They had expected Elvis to be the most upset, to rage, to walk out, but instead he was calm, reassuring. "Yeah, it stings," Elvis continued, his voice gaining a little more strength but still gentle. "It stings bad, but you know what else it tells me?" He looked at each of them, making eye contact. "Tells me we can do it. We did it once. We found that magic. It's still in us. It didn't disappear with the lights or the smoke or the broken tape. He took another deep breath, his shoulders squaring. Think about it. We went from nothing to that. We pulled it out of thin air. That means the talent is here, the feeling is here, the song is here. And we are here. He gestured around the dim studio. We're all here together. He then looked directly at the control room. Chet, Bill, what's the damage? Can we get some power back? Even just partial. What's it gonna take? His question wasn't accusatory or demanding. It was a pragmatic inquiry, a challenge to find a solution, not to wallow in the problem. The sudden shift in his demeanor from deep personal disappointment to calm, focused leadership was astonishing. It was like a switch had been flipped, turning the king into a beacon of hope in the darkness. Chet Atkins blinked. He stared at Elvis, then at Bill Porter. He hadn't expected this turnaround. No one had. Elvis was not just saving the session. He was saving them from their own despair. A small, almost imperceptible spark of hope, faint but undeniable, began to flicker in the dim, smoky air of RCA Studio B. Elvis's words had a profound effect. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. There was no anger, no self-pity, none of the frustration that everyone else was drowning in. His voice was level, almost impossibly calm, laced with a gentle determination that was infectious. Scotty, who had been leaning against the amp, slowly straightened up. Bill, whose head had been in his hands, slowly lifted it, his gaze now fixed on Elvis. DJ actually managed a small, almost imperceptible nod. The simple act of Elvis handing him his drumstick had been a gesture of, let's not give up yet. In the control room, Chet Atkins cleared his throat. He looked at Bill Porter, who was still trying to assess the extent of the electrical damage. Bill, can you get anything back online? Even just enough for us to monitor, to record? Bill Porter, usually a man of few words but precise actions, seemed to snap out of his daze. He moved carefully towards the back of the console where the smoke had originated. Main breaker tripped for sure, he muttered more to himself than to Chet. And that smelled likely some fried capacitors in the power supply. The tape machine is probably worse than I thought, but maybe we can bypass some things or switch to a backup unit if the studio has one that's compatible, even a smaller one. He was already thinking, troubleshooting, his engineering mind kicking into gear. Elvis, seeing them begin to stir, walked closer to the control room glass again. He wasn't demanding, he was simply present, a supportive presence. Whatever it takes. Fellas, we just proved we got it in us. Let's prove we got the grit too. His eyes swept over his bandmates. Y'all heard that take. You know how good it was. That wasn't luck. That was us, all of us working together. He paused, then added with a softer tone. And it ain't gonna be easy to do it again, might even feel impossible right now. But we don't know that for sure, do we? Not until we try? Not until we give it everything we got. Again, he didn't make light of the situation. He acknowledged the difficulty, the pain of the loss. But he also offered. It was a moment of true leadership, the kind that comes not from power or fame, but from character and genuine care for the people around you. Suddenly, Chet Atkins spoke through the intercom, his voice a little strained, but with a newfound energy. And there might be a little hum from the power issues, but it's usable. He paused. It's a scrappy setup, but it'll work. Elvis nodded, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. Scrappy is good, Chet. Scrappy just means we gotta be even better. He looked at his bandmates. You hear that? We're back in business. Scotty straightened up, a newfound energy in his posture. Bill clapped his hands together. A quiet thud. DJ grinned. A rare sight had picked up both his sticks, tapping them lightly. The transformation was remarkable. The defeat from before was gone, replaced by a renewed determination. They returned to the studio floor. The light was still dim, the air still faintly metallic from the burnt electronics. But the instruments hummed with life again. It was a different kind of hum, a slightly more fragile, less polished sound. But it was sound. Elvis stepped back to the microphone, feeling the familiar cool metal against his lips. Closed his eyes for a moment, not to recall the lost perfection, but to reset, to find the new energy. He knew this take wouldn't be exactly the same as the ruined one. It couldn't be. That moment was gone forever. But this one could be something else. Something born of resilience, of shared struggle, of pure grit. He looked at Scotty, who gave him a thumbs up. Bill was ready a relaxed stance. DJ gave a slight nod. "All right, boys," Elvis said, his voice surprisingly clear and strong, cutting through the faint hum of the patched-up equipment. "Let's do this from the top. And let's make this one count. Not just for the song, but for us. For sticking together." He gave DJ the signal. A crisp click of sticks. Scotty's guitar began a familiar melody, but this time there was a subtle edge to it. A raw honesty that hadn't been there before. It wasn't perfect in the polished sense, but it was real. And then Elvis began to sing. His voice was still velvet, but it carried a deeper resonance, a maturity born from the night's trials. There was a quiet strength in every note, a sense of having walked through a challenge and come out stronger. He sang with an intensity that was almost heartbreaking, pouring every bit of his renewed spirit into the lyrics. In the control room, Chet and Bill Porter listened intently. The hum was there, faint but present. The sound wasn't as pristine as it could have been, not as clean as the lost take. But there was something else in this new performance, something intangible yet undeniably powerful. It was the sound of a team battered but not broken, finding its rhythm again. It was the sound of true artistry. Elvis wasn't just singing the words, he was embodying the journey they had all just taken. The vulnerability was still there, but now it was tempered with a profound resilience. The band played with a new kind of precision, a focused energy that stemmed from their shared experience. They were making music, not just because they had to, but because they could, despite everything. The hours of frustration, the moment of pure perfection, the shocking surge, the despair, and then Elvis's calm, unwavering leadership. It all fed into this new performance. It was a song born of fire, forged in adversity, and it glowed with a unique, enduring warmth. As the song progressed, a remarkable transformation occurred. The initial caution, the lingering shadow of the previous disaster, began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming sense of shared purpose and renewed belief. The slight hum from the jury-rigged equipment which Bill Porter had warned them about seemed to fade into the background, becoming almost a part of the song's character. A gentle reminder of the battle they were winning, Elvis sang with an incredible depth of feeling. Each word was carefully sculpted, each phrase imbued with a profound emotional weight. He wasn't just hitting notes, he was telling a story. Not just the story of love in the lyrics, but the story of their struggle, their resilience, their refusal to give up. His voice, usually so effortlessly powerful, now carried a subtle, almost vulnerable edge that made the performance even more poignant. It was the sound of a man who had faced a challenge and chosen to overcome it, bringing that experience into his art. Scotty's guitar work, usually so clean and precise, now had a raw, emotional quality. His solo was not flashy but deeply heartfelt, a beautiful weaving melody that spoke of quiet determination. Bill's bass line was a steady grounding force, a comforting pulse that kept the song moving forward unwavering, despite the circumstances. DJ's drumming was subtle and masterful, his brushes painting textures that enhanced Elvis's vocal, adding a layer of intimacy and warmth. They weren't aiming for the same perfection, they were aiming for new perfection, a different kind of perfection, one that carried the scars of the night, but also the triumph of overcoming. It wasn't the flawless, untouched beauty of the lost take. It was a beauty born of struggle, of shared grit, of finding light in the darkest corners. In the control room, Chet Atkins had a different kind of smile on his face now. It wasn't the smile of relief that comes from a flawless technical take. It was the smile of a man witnessing something truly profound, something that went beyond mere sound engineering. He looked at Bill Porter, who, despite the technical limitations, was working with an intensity that spoke volumes. Bill was making tiny, almost instinctive adjustments, coaxing the best possible sound from the limited, compromised equipment. "That hum," Chet whispered to Bill Porter, "it's almost part of it now. Gives it character. "Doesn't it?" Bill Porter nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the dials. "It's real. It's got heart." He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was a participant in something special. The song built to its emotional crescendo. Elvis's voice swelled full of unwavering commitment, then softened beautifully for the final lines. "For I can't help falling in love with you." The last word was a whisper, a tender sigh full of lingering emotion, and then silence. But this time it was a different silence. It wasn't the hollow, defeated silence of the power surge. It was a rich, full silence, vibrating with the echoes of the music they had just created. It was the silence of accomplishment, of a battle fought and won. He wasn't smiling, a wide, triumphant grin. It was a quiet, satisfied smile, a deep sense of peace washing over his face. He looked at Scotty, who gave him a small, respectful nod. Bill offered a tired but genuine grin. DJ actually threw a stick in the air and caught it, a rare moment of outward celebration. In the control room, Chet reached for the intercom button, his hand hovering for a moment. He looked at Bill Porter, who was slowly, carefully stopping the 2-track recorder. The reels wound down, preserving this unique take. "That," Chet said, his voice husky with emotion through the intercom, "was incredible, gentlemen. Simply incredible." There was a pause. Then he added, "It wasn't the same. It was different. And in some ways, I think it was even better. It has soul. It has heart. It has you in it, Elvis." Collective sigh of relief mingled with quiet triumph filled the studio. They had done it. They had faced disaster, stared down despair, and emerged with something beautiful. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a testament to their spirit, to Elvis's quiet strength, and to the unbreakable bond of music. The light might still be dim. The equipment might still be humming. But the studio was now bathed in the warm glow of success. A success far more meaningful than if the first take had simply gone off without a hitch. As Chet Atkins' words of praise faded from the intercom, a tangible sense of relief washed over everyone in the studio. It wasn't just the relief of finishing a song, but the deeper satisfaction of overcoming a significant The air felt lighter, clearer, even with the faint lingering smell of burnt electronics. Elvis walked over to his bandmates, a genuine, easy smile now gracing his face. "Y'all were fantastic," he said, his voice full of warmth and appreciation. "Every one of you. You dug deep tonight." Scotty clapped him on the shoulder. "You too, E. We were ready to pack it in. You pulled us back, had a feeling you would somehow." There was a quiet admiration in his eyes. Bill Black nodded. "Yeah, I thought we were done for. Lost our perfect take, lost our minds, but you kept us going like nothing happened." DJ simply smiled, picking up his sticks and neatly placing them on his snare drum. He didn't need many words. His steady presence and renewed calm spoke volumes. In the control room, Chet Atkins and Bill Porter were already carefully removing the precious 2-track tape from the backup recorder. It wasn't as pristine as a multi-track master, but it held the soul of the performance, raw and real. Chet leaned into the intercom again. "All right, Elvis fellas, that's a wrap for the night. We've got it. We'll work on getting the main studio back up to snuff tomorrow. But for tonight, you can all go home knowing you made something special." His voice carried a genuine respect, a deeper appreciation for the talent and tenacity he had witnessed. Elvis gave a nod of thanks to the control room, then turned back to his band. "Let's get out of here. There's an all-night diner down the street. Right, my treat. We earned it." Tired but happy murmur of agreement went through the group. They started to pack up their instruments, but the movements were no longer sluggish or defeated. There was a quiet energy, a camaraderie that had been forged in the crucible of the night's events. As Elvis unplugged his microphone, he paused for a moment. He looked around the dimly lit studio at the instruments, the empty coffee cups, the faint haze of lingering smoke. He thought about the perfect take that had been lost, and the new take that had risen from its ashes. It wasn't a perfect ending, not in the traditional sense, but it was perfect in a much more profound way. He realized that true perfection wasn't just about hitting every note flawlessly or having pristine equipment. It was about connection, about resilience, about the human spirit pushing through adversity. It was about the bond between musicians, the trust, the shared understanding. That perfect take had been a moment of technical brilliance, but this take, the one they had just recorded, was a moment of human triumph. It had a story etched into its very core, a story of near defeat and ultimate victory. They walked out of the studio, stepping from the dim, humid confines into the cool, fresh Nashville night air. The city was quiet, most people asleep, unaware of the small drama that had unfolded within those soundproofed walls. The diner, they sat in a booth, the fluorescent lights harsh but welcoming. Plates of greasy hash browns, eggs, and bacon appeared along with endless cups of coffee. They ate slowly, savoring the simple meal, the silence occasionally broken by a comfortable chuckle or a shared memory from the session. Elvis watched his friends, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They were more than just his band. They were his anchor, his support system. And tonight he had been theirs. He had seen their despair, and he had found a way to pull them back, not with grand gestures, but with quiet strength and a belief in their collective ability. He knew that the lost take would always be in memory, a ghost of what might have been. But the take they had secured, the one born from chaos and calm, would forever carry the weight of this night's lesson. It wouldn't just be a song on an album. It would be a testament to resilience, a symbol of how, even when things fall apart, you can find the strength to put them back together, sometimes creating something even more meaningful in the process. The night was fading into dawn, but the studio session, despite its unexpected twists and turns, had brought a new kind of light to them all. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The Can't Help Falling in Love session became a legendary story within RCA Studio B, whispered among engineers and musicians. Not just for the power surge that nearly ruined it, but for Elvis Presley's calm, unexpected reaction that saved the day. The damaged equipment was eventually repaired, and Bill Porter made sure to note the specific incident in the studio's maintenance log, a silent testament to the night's drama. The two-track master they had recorded on that tumultuous night was carefully mixed and mastered, and just as Chet Atkins had predicted, the subtle hum that remained from the strained power lines became an almost imperceptible part of the song, lending it a unique character, a certain warmth and authenticity that perhaps a perfect take might have lacked. When Can't Help Falling in Love was finally released, it became an instant classic, one of Elvis's most beloved and enduring hits. Fans around the world were captivated by its tender melody and Elvis's heartfelt delivery. What they didn't know was the story behind the song, the battle waged in a dimly lit studio, the moment of despair and the quiet strength of the man who sang it for Elvis. The experience was a profound lesson. It taught him that perfection wasn't always about flawless execution. Sometimes it was about the journey, the struggle, the resilience. It taught him the true meaning of teamwork and the power of a calm mind in the face of chaos. He realized that his role wasn't just to sing, but to lead, to inspire, to connect with those around him, not just on stage, but in every challenging moment. His relationship with Scotty, Bill, and DJ deepened significantly. They had always been a close unit, but after that night there was an unspoken understanding, a shared bond forged in the crucible of adversity. They had seen Elvis not just as the king, the superstar, but as a grounded, compassionate leader who genuinely cared about them and the music. They trusted him even more, knowing he wouldn't abandon them when things got tough. In future recording sessions, when technical glitches inevitably arose or frustration mounted, Elvis would often remember that night. Quiet word, a reassuring glance, a small joke. These were the subtle ways he would diffuse tension, drawing on the lesson learned. He knew that creativity, especially under pressure, needed a steady hand, a calm presence. Sometimes, late at night, after a long session, Elvis would listen to "Can't Help Falling in Love." He would close his eyes, not just hearing the music, but remembering the precise moment of the power surge, the initial shock, the despair, and then the slow, steady resolve that had risen from within him and spread through the room. He could almost hear the faint hum of the compromised equipment, the sound of a beautiful song born not of effortless perfection but of sheer will and collective spirit. He remembered the look on Scotty's face, the slump of Bill's shoulders, the quiet defeat of DJ. And then he remembered the spark in their eyes when he spoke, the renewed energy when they realized they would try again. "Wise men say only fools rush in," he would hum softly to himself. And he would remember that it wasn't foolish to keep trying even when everything seemed lost. It was, in fact, the wisest thing of all, because sometimes the greatest art, the most heartwarming stories, are born not from ease but from the quiet strength found in the face of ruin, turning disaster into a triumph that echoes long after the music fades. The power surge had ruined a perfect take, yes. But Elvis Presley's calm reaction hadn't just saved a session. It had cemented a legend showing the true heart of the king, and leaving behind a song that resonated not just with love, but with the quiet power of human resilience. It was a perfect story woven into the fabric of a perfect song.